managers for some of these other programs that we're going to mention throughout this briefing to learn more about their specific opportunities. And then for all questions today, we do have Major Mike Bilvin and Lieutenant Colonel TJ Doc Shanks in a chat today. So as I brief, feel free to type your questions there, and they'll get to them as soon as they can. Also, following the brief, we'll leave about 10 or 15 minutes for further questions as necessary. This is not a how-to brief. We're more or less here to provide you access to the tools that you need to have a successful career of your own. So here's some of the topics we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to start off with introducing the A1K team and their roles, talk about what we do up at AMC headquarters. We'll discuss some CGO and FGO development opportunities. Then we'll take a look at promotions and talk about some significant milestones there, as well as IDE, some things to keep in mind. We'll also give you kind of a behind-the-scenes look at what we see from the IDE standpoint when it comes time to look at schools for folks. Following that, we'll get into a discussion on what the DT is and what its purpose is. We'll talk a little bit about Rated Management Directive, and then we'll close with a discussion on Phoenix Eagle as well as A1L functions. So this is your A1K team. We'll start off with Lieutenant Colonel TJ Doc Shanks. He is the A1KB. You can think of him as someone who handles folks post IDE up through squadron command and beyond. Major Mike Bilvin and myself, we kind of work with the captain to major range. We have Captain Whitney Bursch, not here right now, but she is the MAP DT chair advisor and specializes in everything development team related. And then lastly, we have Lieutenant Colonel John JD Foy. He works everything 06 selects to 06 level. We all sit within about 20 feet of each other. So big picture, the A1KO, KB, KL roles are to execute the AMC Commander's force development intent, and we do that through running certain programs and providing administrative assistance for others. Some examples of that are the Phoenix Horizon program, where we take captains and send them to mobility, reach, or torch programs, which we'll discuss on a later slide. We also facilitate the Phoenix Eagle process, which is how we hire our future squadron commanders and chief of safeties for the MAF. We assist with the MAF development teams for various points in your career. We support A3's Rated Management Directive. And then also, as you know, we educate the force on force development. And we do that through several channels. So the ATA Symposium today. We also historically have road shows to the CONUS bases and overseas. We try and do those once per year if possible. Right now, what we're planning on doing is reaching out virtually and doing space-based specific briefings when able. And then we'll get on the road as soon as we can to do the in-person road shows, which we're looking forward to. We also brief at the Squadron Commanders course when Squadron Commanders come here to headquarters. And we also brief wing and OG Commander orientation courses here at Scott as well. This is a visual timeline of something I've already kind of touched on. So you can see here, the blue boxes are MAP DT actions, and then the yellow ones are more of like the aborted programs. So you can see the first time that we really reach out to someone in their career, generally speaking, is the Phoenix Horizon program. So kind of that 03 level. And again, they interface with A1KO during that process. After that, the first touch point for most folks in the MAP is going to be the major select vector. So for the major selects in the crowd, you will have just got your vectors somewhat recently loaded into AMS so that you could look at it. But again, we look at all the majors, get them before the development team, and that's typically two generals. So you're talking the Expeditionary Center Commander and the 18th Air Force Commander, as well as wing commanders and vice wing commanders who look at records to give kind of an enterprise level feedback to MAF members at 5 points in their career, which you can see on the slide. As you move up in your career, you'll notice it kind of switches to the A1KB tier and lastly ends with A1L. The last time that you'll touch base with A1KB will be the STE outplacement vector from the DT. This is a development timeline overview for the visual learners. You can see it all starts with that functional expert. So the first years in your career, you should be really focused on becoming an expert in your airframe and your mission and developing credibility there. For the MAF, what that tends to mean is we'd like to see you become an MWS IP. What that does is it keeps certain doors open down the road. For those who start off in something like the C-21 that's not in an MWS, that's fine. Just make sure that when you do get to your MWS gray tail unit, that you are laser focused on becoming credible and an expert there in that community. You can see after that 4-year point, that's when we expect folks to start broadening, and there's a lot of avenues that we'll discuss in today's briefing on how to do that if you'd like to. And then you'll notice up at the top is that large blue bar for all kinds of staff opportunities. They're available at many points in your career, and they're varied greatly. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out, ask. There are a multitude of staff opportunities that are unknown or not very well known that we can help you find if it's something that you need for your career. This is a tool that can help you with that. So the Math Mentorship tool is designed to get your plan before your supervisor, your commander, your senior rater, and just talk about some of your career goals. So here we can see in the example, we have Captain Average Joe. He's a captain. He's a CLO and a co-pilot, so he's living the dream. The top bar, he's got his plan A, and that's how we tend to see this used. So the top bar should be your plan A. Your second line can be kind of a backup plan, or if you're a joint spouse, you can have your spouse's career considerations there. And then the bottom line is a good place to put personal life info. So on mine, I have dates related to my children's schooling. You can have your ADSC on there, GI Bill transfer dates on there, just to keep that in mind as you progress in your career. Along the bottom, you have your developmental milestones, like majors, board, your first, second, third look for IDE, things of that nature. And then there's space for notes in the bottom. Those are just good talking points for your commander if you have special family considerations or hopes and dreams for your assignments in the future. At the bottom, you can see there are gate months. It's a good place to have a reminder for if you need to keep flying, or if you finished your first gate, it opens up opportunities for staff and some other programs like officer instruction duties, which we'll get into on a later slide. But it's a good tool, especially for visual learners, just to sanity check your plans. It also helps with timing post programs. That's something that can be often overlooked, is how, when you graduate a program or finish a job, what does your timing look like? What does it set you up for? And what might hurt you in that regard? So now we'll take some time and talk about career broadening opportunities for CGOs and for FGOs. A lot of them are very similar, but there are some slight differences, and we'll get into that in these next 2 slides. So to start off with, we have the Phoenix Horizon programs. So in the past, this was a deal where you put your name in the hat for all of these, and you didn't have a whole lot of say in what you placed into, but we've changed that. So now when you apply for a Phoenix Horizon program, it's a la carte. You can, if you only want to reach and you only want to try to reach to the 89th, you can only put that, and that's what the board will consider you for. So it can be good for you as far as limiting what you can be outplaced to if that's what you want. So the REACH program, mobility plan program, and torch program are looking for 4 to 8 year captains, and the rest of the nomination instructions will come out in the PSDM yearly. That's kind of the general target audience that we're looking for. For REACH, we're looking to place you from airlift to tanker or tanker to airlift, but we also have options for the 89th and ATC, and we generally have 1 per year. For mobility, we look to place you at a contingency response wing or an air mobility operations wing. We also have opportunities to become an AMLO. We have 1 AMLO per year, and the job assignment rotates. This year, we placed an AMLO to McCord. For torch, and those positions are flying positions. So if you want to keep flying 8-month wise, you can do that through mobility and obviously REACH. For torch, we look to bring captains to staff. So what that looks like here right now is you spend a year in AOC learning about C2, learning about airlift or tanker ops. If you came from one of those career fields, we try and broaden you and have you learn something new. And then following that year, we outplace you to the A staff to learn about how the A staff operates. During all these programs, you have incredible opportunities to attend TDYs that'll develop you. And also you have some great mentorship opportunities at all these bases where you can meet with senior leaders, you can attend meetings and see how things work behind the scenes. In the flying realm, we have opportunities to develop that T-code experience, that formal instructor duty. For the math folks, generally that looks a lot like white jets and FTU time. And a lot of that has to do with gate months and keeping people experiencing the jet, building that airmanship, and building the next generation. Along those lines, we also have the Air Force Weapons School, of course. It doesn't only build depth in your airframe, it'll build breadth as you learn to integrate with other warfighting capabilities as we prepare for the next fight. We do have staff opportunities, start on CAPNOM, exec, and aide de camp. We're working on the Big 5, Little 5 applications right now, opportunities to work closely with senior leaders and be developed in that regard. As far as foreign language opportunities, We do have several programs there, FAO and LEAP, for instance. For folks that pursue FAO, there's a PSDM every year that'll talk about that opportunity, but generally what you can expect there is you can work overseas in something like an embassy and bounce back and forth between your FAO assignments and your core assignments as an 11M, let's say. There are several other research and fellowship programs here. Officer Instructor Recruiting Special Duty is a hot topic lately. There's now a board that looks at candidates for these programs. You kind of apply for all of them, but at the same time, you can put in your preferences to try and get the job that you desire. And we'll go in depth with that on a later slide. And of course, with all these opportunities, they're available on MyPurse. And if you follow that link chain below, you can learn more about these. You know, the OI and RSD program. It's probably a 15-page PDF document, and has multiple jobs in there to consider if you're interested. Then for the FGO slide, very similar and a lot of repeats. There are other opportunities that open though within these same programs. For instance, for Officer Instructor Recruiting Special Duty, you can go be an ROTC deck commander. Again, for Officer Instructor and Recruiting Special Duty, there are incentives to this. It is a CSAP directive to gain that formal instructive, or not a directive, it is emphasized to gain that formal instructor duty, and this is one of the ways that they've promoted this. It's actually increased a lot of interest in these programs. So the experience now gets added to your officer selection brief, which goes before a promotion board, and they can see in one place if you have that formal instructor duty. They're generally 2 to 3 year duty tour lengths, and you'll get follow-on preference when possible. You also can be exempt from deployments for a lot of these programs. For the wide net for eligibility, we look for anybody from first lieutenant to lieutenant colonel, but again, for math rated folks, you need to be first gate complete prior to your OI RSD report date. On the bottom, you can see some of the numbers that they picked up in the past. For the last board, they had some ROTC instructor positions, some deck commander positions. They had a few positions at Maxwell, which generally they struggled to fill some of those at Maxwell, and they had no USAPA positions this time. USAPA, they have things like athletic department and dean of faculty positions. This isn't talking about the USAPA AOC, which is an ITE program. All right, now we'll get into promotion timing opportunity as well as some of the changes that have happened recently. So you can see on the left, we have the DoD instruction, desired active duty list, promotion timing, and opportunity, right? And on the right side, you have the Air Force averages. And you can see that for the Air Force, pin-on timing was generally faster than the DoD desired standard. And promotion opportunity was generally higher than the standard as well. So what we've done is we've tried to bring that more in line with the DoD so that it looks a lot more like the sister services rates. We've also done away with below the promotion zone. So you can see in the previous state, we did have below the promotion zone selections. Some drawbacks were that it accelerated development paths and tended to constrict people to make quick jumps between assignments, including shortening their joint time. Also, we had folks who, if they didn't get a below the zone promotion, they felt like they were off the quote unquote high performance officer track and felt like it was time to get out of the Air Force. What we've done now is we've changed it to a merit-based reordering. So certain people will now promote ahead of others, but we've done away with the year, 2 year in advance system. It keeps more on-ramps open and allows for more time at certain assignments, like joint times. So you can see on the top slide, this is what the career path used to look like. You can see the purple container there, 2 years joint time. That was kind of a min-run, 22-month joint tour, when the goal was really 3 years. And what we were finding was that senior Air Force leaders weren't steeped in their joint experience like some of the other service components were. So at the bottom, what we've done now, as you can see, the brown container is now added. So instructor, recruiting, or career broadening tour, which doesn't have to happen there. It can happen at any time in your career. You can think of it as some slop, some built-in slop there. And then we've also made sure that joint tour is now a full 3 years just to give you that breadth of experience at that point in your career. For this slide, the big takeaway is it's a long process, the promotion process, and then also it's important to know when your accounting date is, because it determines who's going to be writing your PRF. So it's an 8-month process from board announcement to the first pin-ons. For instance, the Majors board is happening this December, and so the accounting date was earlier in the summer. Ideally, you want your accounting date to happen with a senior rater who knows you and is familiar with your record and you as an individual, your professional reputation, and that kind of thing. For this upcoming majors board, they will also continue to take updates in MILT PDS up to 2 weeks prior to the board date happening. So if you do still have updates, go to MyPurse and request those MILT PDS updates, and you should be fine by the time the board happens. Now we'll get into some school discussions. So IDE and SDE, as far as the candidates go, they did away with the select status and 3849 in recent years, and now the process all happens on Talent Marketplace in a item called the Officer Development Plan. What that does is it allows you to go in and put your school preferences, your comments for consideration, and then your senior rater can also go in and put in their comments as well as give a vector. The senior raters may nominate up to 30% of their candidates, and for the IDE folks, you have 3 looks at school. For STE, they have 5 looks. The senior rater accountability date this year is 1 November 20. You can also submit distance learning consideration memos. What that does is it allows you to get some credit for IDE for folks who do a program either at AFID or some kind of PhD, and those are spelled out in the IDE SDE guide and what that process means for you. As far as the school selection process for the individuals, you'll go into Talent Marketplace. You can indicate up to 5 programs and then leave your own comments, and those comments are important because as the various boards and DTs look at your comments, your record, and your school choices, they'll kind of try and meet what your desires are as much as possible. The commander can also nominate or not nominate. They can provide a stratification and a rank and their own comments. So what happens first is the central PME board will score all the records. So we're not just talking MAP officers, we're talking about all the officers involved. Following that process, they send the specific MAP rated folks to the development team. And then they'll take that portion and they'll recommend school matches. So they'll take your 5 and they'll pare it down to 3 matches. They then send that to the Developmental Education Designation Board, and they're the ones who finalize the selection. We included some statistics for this last round. So 27% of officers got matched to their first choice, 66% were matched to their top 3, and 34% were matched to their top 5 preferences. And when that kind of thing happens, they'll definitely be looking in your comments to see what your considerations are. A lot of folks have family considerations, which is understandable. So this spreadsheet shows a little bit about what I was talking about. So you can see the DT vectors just off to the side of the screen in yellow. We removed names for this, so it's confidential, but you can see there in the order of merit, kind of in the middle of your screen, the top MAP person that was vectored was number 2 overall in the entire Air Force, and they wanted POLAD fellowship. As you move down that list, you'll see at the very bottom we have line 33 there, that's the 32nd individual. They actually scored out as the 164th person because, again, they're not just being stacked against MAP officers for school. So this just goes to show it's very hard to get in res school, including ACSC. It's really competitive, and there's a lot of competitive records out there. You can also see there's definitely a 10 column, that dark green there with the yeses and the nos. So senior raters do have definitely a 10s they can give out, and it's a good opportunity to recognize folks who may not have an extremely competitive record, but are very deserving of school based on their performance in their current job. So again, most officers will end up attending ACSC, and there's also the sister service schools. Both of those schools presently are guaranteed if you defer them. That may change, but as for now, those types of schools you can defer and get them the next year if you need to for timing. We also have IDE fellowships available. For the IDE fellowships, keep in mind that you'll still need to do ACSC in correspondence while you're completing your fellowship if you haven't already done your ACSC prior to beginning that fellowship. There are plenty of opportunities for international schools. Keep in mind that if you are applying to an international school, they will have more stipulations attached. For instance, you'll need to be fluent in a language. If you're not, they'll send you to specialized language training prior to beginning that school. You'll also have a FAO follow-on for most of those. So at that point, once you finish that IDE, you'll do a FAO tour and then go back to your 11M tour, FAO tour, and so on and so forth. There are joint schools, and then also there's the SAPA AOC program. For those who put AOC and I believe their top 3 choices, the AOC will convene their own board in the summer to determine who they're going to pick up for the AOC program. And that's a 3-year deal. You get your master's in your first year, and then you do 2 years at the Air Force Academy as an AOC. The bottom is just a visual depiction of everyone's looks, and then again, at the very bottom, we have the chain of links to get to the program description guide on my person. Just a couple of things I want to highlight on this slide. So 1 November 2020 is that senior rater accountability date. Again, we talked about the importance of that. You want to have an accountability date with a senior rater who preferably knows you and is familiar with your record. The other date to emphasize here is March. So right in the middle of that chart, that's when that board convenes, the central board with looking at all the records. So it's important that if you're competing for school, that you make sure your record is up to date prior to March. And you can see it's a long timeline. They'll release the announcement, and then it's another year till the school starts. So it's a fairly long process. So now we'll get into the development team and what its purpose is. So the bottom line of what we do is we support the MAP DT chair, in this case, the 18th Air Force Commander and the Expeditionary Center Commander. We advocate for force development goals, and we provide force development solutions. Bottom line, we try to put the right person in the right place at the right time for their career. We've made some changes in recent years to the vector process, which we'll show later. And then the general timeline is below. Some of that has changed due to COVID, but generally speaking, the summer MAP DT is major select vectors, IDE, and SDE recommendations. And then in the fall, we typically do Lieutenant Colonel select IDE and SDE squadron commander outplacers. And then the Lieutenant Colonel select MAP DT board is actually going to happen in late November. So that's a recent development. So in the past, what the development team would do is they would examine all the records, and then when they provided a vector, it was just a staff vector. So if you were assigned JCS as your vector, you knew you were in the top 3%. And it wasn't based on anything you've done in the past. You may have already had joint time. You could still get a joint vector. But for those folks that were in that bottom category, the MAGCOM, where they're in that quote unquote bottom 70%, that's just a huge chunk. So it wasn't the best way to deliver feedback to the map. So what we've done now is vectors are no longer directly linked to performance. We include more tailored comments. They're still fairly generic in a way, but now we break it out into multiple categories. So you can see there for major selects, they have 4 categories: well above, on par with peers, and below peers. And what we do there is when we take all these records and score them, we place them against a curve, like in the bottom picture there, to break out the truly exceptional performance on either end. And then that center of mass is the bulk. That's 68% roughly of the records within 1 standard deviation of that median score. So once we break out the top and bottom categories, then we can assign those vectors. But we don't just do it blindly. We don't just give people staff vectors without looking at their records. So now what we do is we look at what prior experiences you have and give you a vector based on that. There's still a little bit of ranking mixed into that, but it's a lot more tailored and I think a lot more effective. But if you have feedback for us on these new vectors, please feel free to reach out. We'll get into some of those on the next slide. But the important piece with the DT is when you get your vector, it is a starting point for feedback, right? So you may get the feedback at your base that you're doing really well, but then the MAP DT comes back and says you're in the middle of the pack. So that's that enterprise level look at your records when compared with everyone at your place in your career. So for instance, major selects. So again, take that feedback, use it as a starting point for feedback with your senior rater, with your squadron commander, with your supervisor, and continue your development as an individual. So here are some examples for the vectors. Again, we talked about majors having the 4 categories. They actually do away with below peers for everything beyond major select. But it'll generally talk to the number of records that were scored and then some suggestions for you as you continue your career. For IDE outplacers, this is new for this year. We added that last blurb at the end there. So a colonel who sat on the board should reach out to you to provide some specific feedback. So that should be happening for everyone who just met the DT this fall. So all the school outplacers, squadron commander outplacers, and I guess excluding the major select. So those prior 3 categories there should be having a colonel reach out to them to provide some tailored feedback. All right, now we'll talk a little bit about the APOS timeline as well as the rated management directive. We just finished out the time for bidding on assignments, as well as the billet owners putting in bids on folks. So now, right now, on that top line, you can see that we're in the stage where AFPC is matching assignments to individuals. That's a pretty long phase. It goes from 29 October to 29 January. So throughout that period, the AFPC AOs are very busy assigning phases to spaces. And then those assignments should start getting loaded at the end of January. We'll talk a little bit about the RMD and what it means for us. Generally speaking, it keeps bodies in the flying squadrons and then min-mans the staff as much as possible to keep the squadrons healthy. You can see on the right-hand chart there, MAGCOM near the bottom, overall rated goal is 61 to 65% manned. So staff assignments are limited. Typically what you can expect if you're trying to get to staff, it probably won't happen unless you're an IDE or SDE outplacer or doing something where it's mandated that you get to staff as some kind of follow-on. Phoenix Eagle board, as mentioned earlier, it's how we select our future leaders in the map, and it produces the list that we hire squadron commanders and chiefs of safety from. Generally speaking, timeline-wise, the announcement comes out in March, and there's a May suspense for packages, and sometime in June we'll have the next Phoenix Eagle board. The results get released in August, and then the bidding and interviews can begin from that point on. It's arbitrated by A1KB, so Lieutenant Colonel Shanks, and then the list itself is approved by the 18th Air Force Commander and Expeditionary Commander, and ultimately goes before the AMC Commander. Following that process, the DO hiring begins, and it's still ongoing. It is a long process. It begins 2 weeks after the bid approval, generally speaking. And it's a process similar to Phoenix Eagle, but there's no requirement to hire a DO off the Phoenix Eagle list. So you can be a DO without making that list. And DO recently has become a favored thing, or a more favored thing in someone's record. The map is slowly starting to come around and look at DO like the CAP does. In the CAP, you have to be a DO if you want to be a squadron commander, because it is a valuable experience. And so the map is taking a look at that. If you have ATC, AFSOC, or AFMC experience, they do have separate command hiring processes for those. So if you do have a background there, you can apply for multiple command lists, cast that wider net if that's something you desire, looking for leadership opportunities as a commander. And then non-rated command candidate lists, they're determined via a wholly separate process. They do that via the development team. A1L for the senior leader management, that's Lieutenant Colonel J.D. Foy. What they do is they advise colonels and help colonels throughout their career. They start advising them at the 06 select level and then continue to follow them during their time as a colonel. What they would like from you, what Colonel Foy would like from you if you're in this situation, is to definitely be in touch with him. If you haven't reached out before, give him a call. He's happy to talk to you and help you out. He wants to hear your goals, your career aspirations, and then family considerations. And they ask that you stay up on the Colonel's Handbook and then read any Colonel notims that he publishes. And there's his contact information in the bottom. If you'd like to learn more about some of our A1KO functions and processes, we do have a A1KO portal page. There you can see who's currently in the office. You can also find information on the Phoenix Eagle board, the Phoenix Horizon board, to include release PDSMs and announcements. We also have our force development briefings that we brief when we go on our road shows, as well as a blank map mentorship tool that you can pull from there and fill out to show to your supervisor or squadron commander. Again, our overall bottom line, be aware of your options and your timing. We're here to provide you the tools you need to have a successful career. Always be looking for feedback, to request it from your supervisors and your peers and your subordinates, and also be ready to give feedback and work on your ability to do so. If there's one thing that we can always improve on, it's giving feedback. During your career, you'll sometimes feel like some doors have closed, but others will have opened. You know, when you progress from CGO to FGO, different doors open, just like we talked about with OI and RSD, for instance. There's no golden ticket, no path to success. If you're an SOSDEG, that doesn't mean you're set up for life. You still have to have that sustained performance, and that's key. That's one thing I've learned since I've been up here, seeing all the records, the hundreds and hundreds of records that pass before these boards. Sustained performance is definitely key. The people that come out on top, they have honestly incredible records. So that is the bottom line there. So the summary for today, we talked about the A1K team, the people who are currently in the office working for you guys, helping you guys in your careers. We talked about our role as A1K to support the AMC commander and develop future leaders for the next fight. We talked some about the CGO and FGO development opportunities. There's numerous opportunities. They're on the MyPERS page. And again, feel free to reach out to the A1KO office with questions at any time if you'd like. We talked about the promotion system. We talked about how the below the zone went away and how now there's more time in your career to develop breadth of experience and do formal instructor duties and develop your joint time as well. We also talked about different deadlines to update records in the near future. For IDE, we talked about how competitive it is to go to school. We talked about the new process on Talent Marketplace and some milestones there. For the development team, remember the DT vectors are a starting point for feedback. So take that vector that you got from the DT, that enterprise level look at your record, take it to your squadron commander or supervisor to get further feedback from them. We looked at the rated management directive and what that does to staff and the flying units. And then lastly, we finished up with a look at Phoenix Eagle, how we hire future commanders and chiefs of safety, and A1L and how they serve 06s in the Air Force. This concludes the briefing. I'm going to leave this slide up for our contact information. What we're going to do now is we're going to be in the chat answering all the questions that you guys have. Again, it's been a pleasure briefing you, and we look forward to serving you guys and helping you guys make the best career possible for yourselves. Thanks.
Thank you, Captain Knudsen. I'd like to remind everyone, we thank you for joining us today. If you are not a member of the ATA, please consider joining at https://atalink.org, become a member. We will leave this slide up and people may continue to ask questions until 10 till the hour when we will conclude the seminar.